You know, choosing lenses is probably the most important part of shooting a film, I think. You know, whether it's a YouTube video or whatever, like the lens that you put on your camera is going to pretty much determine how good that camera is. Because, you know, the camera body, you know, it gives you all the specs, you know, the dynamics, the autofocus, like all that kind of stuff. Although the lenses also are included in autofocus. But, you know, the stuff that people worry about, like rolling shutter and stabilization, all that, that really comes from the body. But, you know, I think people working on real projects, like if you're not just coming to YouTube to like learn about specs and stuff like that, I think you quickly realize that it's all about the lenses that you choose that are going to, you know, eventually make the project look the way it's going to look. I mean, of course, your composition, what you put in the frame, your lighting, all of that is very, very important. But when you think about like using, you know, like matching lenses, for example, so I'm shooting a film and I have 3 anamorphic lenses, right? They're APS-C series lenses. Of course, now the sun's going to come out and ruin this whole shot, but whatever, I'm just going to roll with it. I have these 3 series lenses and they definitely match, but I'm not quite sure they're going to be able to handle every scene that I want to shoot with regards to the focal lengths. Like I have the equivalent of a 40, a 28, a 40, and an 85 equivalent, right? So that should be good enough to cover pretty much anything. But what if I have something like ultra wide that I need? What if I'm in a tight space and I need to capture everything? What if I'm in a car? What if I'm in an apartment or something like that, like a really confined space? And what if I want to capture, you know, my subject inside of the space, but I don't want it to look completely cramped? I might need a 20mm lens or a 16. And then I have to start thinking about matching colors so that they don't look completely different. You know, it doesn't like take you out of the story. It's not distracting, you know? And so the first important thing is to obviously choose the aspect ratio that you're going to shoot this film in. And then you don't have to necessarily use all anamorphic lenses if you're choosing a 2.39 to 1 aspect ratio. But it is better if you have all the same lenses that match. It's just going to make your life easier when it comes to color grading, all that kind of stuff. But you don't need it. But that's why it's really important to learn how to color grade, to learn how to match, to make sure your white balance is on point, to really make sure that everything looks good. So what you really have to do is you have to figure out what you're going to have available to you, and then you have to start really testing with that. And that's what I'm going through right now. You know, I've already chosen the aspect ratio for my film, and I have these lenses, and I have these shots that I want to capture, and they're kind of complicated. And I need varied focal, like I could shoot the entire film with one wide angle lens, but it wouldn't look exactly the way I want it to look, because there are some shots that I want a longer focal length kind of vibe to. But I don't have the same brand, I don't have the same lenses that would absolutely match. And so I got to practice with that. I have to go out there and shoot with all kinds of various different types of lenses to make sure that I can match the colors, to make sure that they, you know, they look like they're a part of the same story. I think if you're doing like a documentary, it's probably something that you can more easily get away with. But yeah, I think it's really important. So I'm out here practicing using 3 anamorphic lenses because there are certain shots that I want to get that I need 3 cameras. I need 3 angles. So the other thing is I'm trying to get 3 camera bodies that are exactly the same, so that the camera bodies have the same, you know, color science and things like that, because that also adds to the equation. You know, the lenses look different, and then if, you know, like if you have a Canon body and a Sony body and a Panasonic body, you're going to have different color science, then you're really going to be challenged in trying to make this stuff match. But sometimes you have what you have, you know. So there's the option to rent. There's the option to buy and return something in 90 days. There's all kinds of stuff that people do to get around that kind of problem. Shit, I wish the sun, it was like perfect out here before I came here, and all of a sudden the sun broke through the clouds. So I might not even be able to use this if I don't like the way it looks. So I think what I'm going to have to do is I gotta, I have a Panasonic S5 and I have a GH5. One of the reasons I love the GH5 is because it offers me unlimited recording. And so there's some time-lapse stuff that I want to do in 4K that I'm not going to be able to do with the Panasonic S5. Like I can get these cameras external power so that they'll just run for like 10, 12 hours. But the GH5 will run unlimited time. The S5 has a 30-minute limit unless I go in, 1080. So that's something I have to think about. So I think, as much as I would hate to do it, I think I might sell the GH5 and I just have 2 micro four thirds lenses, and they're not really worth much of anything. But I think I'm going to sell them, trade it in, get another S5, and then have to buy a third S5 so I can use all 3 of my anamorphic lenses at the same time to get these shots, which the scene that I'm talking about is the bulk of my film. It's going to be probably 70% of the entire film. This scene where I don't want to tell you anything because I don't want to give it away, because it is so different than anything else I've ever done. I've made 2 feature films already. This is a complete departure from what I've done before. But I need 3 camera bodies, and I need to use these 3 lenses at the same time if I'm able to do it in the way that I want to do it. But I'm not sure I'm going to be able to pull it off like that. And like I always say, filmmaking is all about solving problems, and I'm going to have to try to figure it out. If I can't do it in exactly the way that I want to do it, I'm going to have to just figure it out. But I think that's something to really think about. It's easy to come on YouTube and just talk about, excuse me, the quality of lenses, different lenses, different brands, Sigma, Tamron, all this bullshit. But when you're talking about making a film, you stop thinking about different brands and you start thinking about matching. You start thinking about the way your film is going to look, and you start thinking about the best gear that suits the job. What's the right tool for the job, like we always talk about. And I know that my head is just going to be completely white right now because the sun has come through. So this is probably never going to see the light of day, and I'm probably going to have to shoot something later today. So I think I'm going to end this part of the video right now. If this makes it to the final video, you know what I'm saying. I'm like, damn, why did this have to happen? So anyway, yeah, I'm on the road to having 3 Panasonic S5s because I want to have the same 3 bodies, and I'll be able to use all my series lenses. And then I want to see if I can match my Minolta vintage lenses, or right now I'm using the Panasonic 20 to 60 kit lens, which I hardly ever use, but sometimes I use it when I'm just running around having fun. And actually it's a great photography camera. And I want to see which of these lenses matches best with my anamorphic lenses, because the anamorphic lenses are going to be the bulk of the film. And that's really the most important thing. So yeah, I'm going to start testing that. And I'm really excited about what I'm doing right now. And I'm shooting at 60 millimeters right now on this 20 to 60 kit lens. I'm about 10 feet away from the camera. You can see some cool stuff behind me. There's a restaurant back there and the pedestrian bridge, and I got some foreground to make it interesting. So you see this little bush, floating around because it's kind of windy out here. Also, if you notice, I have 2 lavalier mics on my body right now. I got this Hollyland Lark Max, which I hate the way it looks, but it works so well. So I'm recording internally into this receiver, but I'm also recording directly into the camera with the Hollyland. I'm also using a Purple Panda lavalier mic, and I'm recording into my Zoom H1n audio recorder. The reason I'm doing that is because I've been having problems with this again. And I think it's actually the cable, but I'm not positive what's going on. But I'm hearing crackling and stuff like that, so I just wanted to make sure I got audio. So I have 3 audio sources going at the same time, so I'm guaranteed to have good audio. So it's either going to be in here, which records at a much lower level than what's going directly into the camera, and then this I have the level set at a pretty low level because this is incredibly proficient. Now the sun's going crazy. All right, I'm going to stop this video, and if I continue, it'll be in a different location later on today. All right. All right, let's continue this discussion about focal lengths and different lenses and aspect ratios and all this. Like, choosing your lens is really important. Now I'm shooting at 20 millimeters, so you can see the difference. Before, I was shooting at 60 millimeters, which was the extreme other end of this lens. So I'm just saying, you want to choose lenses that match, because that will be the easiest case scenario, matching everything when you get to the end of your project. Otherwise, you're going to have to really figure it out with regards to your color grading and stuff like that. And also, you know, if you're like a really good YouTuber and, you know, you're interested in all kinds of gear and stuff like that, there's certainly nothing wrong with buying all kinds of stuff from all kinds of different companies. But I think it's smarter if you're an artist doing things outside of YouTube. Like if you're making films, if you're doing corporate work or weddings and things like that, especially if you're doing like narrative work, documentaries, things of that nature, it's probably a good idea to plan your purchasing for the future. Like, think about what kind of work are you going to do, you know? What type of outcome are you hoping for with your gear? Because then, you know, you're probably not going to buy lenses from all different companies and stuff like that. You know, unless you're just into owning a whole lot of different stuff for making YouTube videos, like videos for no apparent reason other than testing gear, which is fine. I mean, if that's your hobby, that's cool. But if you're doing actual projects that have to be like coherent, consistent type of work, you're going to want to get stuff that makes it as easy as possible to do that kind of work. As you can see, I'm still doing this test with all this audio stuff. And you know, the other interesting thing is, and you know, I've always wondered about this, and I'm really investigating this deeply now that I'm doing this project, is combining anamorphic lenses with spherical lenses on the same project. I know, you know, obviously I know you can do that, you know, as long as you work with your frame markers on your camera. If you have that, like I have a Panasonic S5, I have frame markers, so I could set it to 2.39 to 1, 4:3. I could shoot cinema 4K, regular 4K. You know, I have all these options, so I can, you know, try to make sure that my composition fits inside of the aspect ratio that I'm shooting for. But, you know, it's really an interesting concept to think about whether or not your spherical lenses are going to look markedly different than your anamorphic lenses when you get to the final project, you know, product. You know, like I have these Minolta Rokkor vintage lenses, and they even look kind of anamorphic, you know, and like I have the Helios 44-2, which I just made a video about. I mean, you know, they have interesting bokeh and stuff like that, but it's different. Even though it's interesting and it can look anamorphic, it's not the same anamorphic lenses that I have. So the bokeh is going to look different, the distortion is going to look different, you know, like that imperfection kind of vibe that we love from, you know, vintage lenses and anamorphic lenses is going to be different if you start mixing and matching inside of the same story. And so I'm really, really testing that deeply right now to make sure that I don't, you know, do this project that I'm so proud of and I get all my storytelling together and the dialogue, you know, like I have performances that I love and I get everything that I want and I shoot in different locations, but I've now mixed and matched with different lenses, spherical here, anamorphic here, and, you know, different companies, and all of a sudden I get to post-production and it just looks like a mishmash of all kinds of different crap instead of one cohesive project. And especially since I'm not like a professional colorist. You know, I mean, I get by and I do pretty well, but if I have a project that has stuff from all over the place and I'm now trying to match, that might be a serious challenge for me. I'm not sure. So it's something I really got to think about. I think you should think about it too, especially when you're talking about buying lenses for your camera and also buying camera bodies. You know, if you want to own a whole bunch of different kinds of cameras, you know, unless you have like, these are my cameras for weddings, these are my cameras for corporate stuff, these are my cameras for fun, these are my cameras for narrative or documentary work, like, you know, it might be a good idea to stick with Panasonic or stick with Sony, you know, stick with Nikon, stick with Canon, to have the same colors, to have, you know, so the IBIS looks the same, so your dynamic range is more of what you can expect, you know, your color science is closer to what you're shooting with all the time, no matter what you're using. I mean, you know, I even wonder about like a full frame Panasonic with micro four thirds, like, is the GH7 or the GH5, like in my case, the GH5 color science the same as the S5? It's really not. They look kind of different. You know, the log in each of those cameras is a little bit different. It's hard to match them, but even when I use the same picture profile, if I use Cine-like V in the S5 and the GH5, it looks a little bit different, which is weird. But, you know, the other thing is I'm not going to use Cine-like V for my project. I'm always going to shoot in log. So you see, there's just a lot of stuff to think about. You know, maybe you should have a bunch of bodies that just shoot raw. And then you don't have to worry about it, because with raw footage, it's so much easier to match everything. And, you know, even then, when you're talking about lenses, like at least the colors and at least the dynamic range and at least the, you know, like at least you'll be able to match that part of it, like the bokeh, the distortion, the imperfections, the character of the lenses. That's a whole nother thing. And, you know, it might not even matter to a lot of people. You know what I mean? I mean, at the end of the day, as long as the story's good, it's not going to matter all that much. But if you're really meticulous about it, if you're really trying to get something that, you know, you feel good about, as not only as a storyteller, but as a filmmaker, you know, like the technical aspects of your filmmaking, in addition to the storytelling, then it is something to think about. So I'm thinking about that. So I don't know, you know, like, and also, you know, I think about this, like the newer cameras, like the S1 Mark II, you know, the Nikon Z6 or the Z8 or whatever, you know, the Sony ZV-E1, or, you know, the new Sony that's supposed to come out, you know, whatever, this FX3 Mark II, like, are these cameras going to be easier to match if you mix and match with the older ones? Like, if you use an A7S III, how's that going to look with the new FX camera? Can you match that with an FX6 or, you know, I mean, you know, like, same thing with Panasonic, like I said. The S1 Mark II, how does that look with a GH5, if you still have a GH5? I mean, just because you bought an S1 Mark II doesn't mean you don't have 9 other older cameras, and it doesn't mean that the GH5 or a GH7 might not be the right camera for that particular scene that you want to shoot. I just, you know, I wonder, like, you know, these cameras are supposedly improving all the time. Better color science, things like that, but I don't know if that's true. I think they improve with regards to usability, you know, with convenience, with autofocus and dynamic range and things like that, better IBIS. But I'm not sure the image quality changes all that much. I mean, but they're using different sensors, so it is something to think about. Like, when you get something new, does that mean that all the older cameras that you have now cannot be used with that new camera? I mean, you know, if you have enough money and it doesn't matter to you, it doesn't mean you can't keep all your cameras, but doesn't mean you can't use them on the same. Like, what if you're doing a concert and you need like 8 cameras to capture everything you want to capture? I mean, I know a concert's kind of wild and crazy, but I mean, if you really want to be consistent, does that mean it's not going to match? I don't know. I mean, in my case, that doesn't matter. In my case, I know that all of my shooting is going to require anywhere from 1 to 3 cameras tops. And so I just want to make sure that they match so that it's easy for me when I get to post-production. I don't want to go shoot and get all the, you know, the composition that I want perfect and all the performances perfect and I have everything the way I want it, and then, you know, I'm not happy with the way it looks at the end because I couldn't really match the colors. I couldn't really match the way the lenses look in terms of imperfections in the corners and things like that. Like, I can see how that might make a difference, but I don't know. You know, when I was in the music business, people were crazy over the you know, the quality of vocals, right? Like the quality of the digital to audio conversion. And, you know, I was not one of those people. Like, I remember being in the studio with my friend T.M. Stevens, may he rest in peace, and he was recording his album. And I remember T.M. was like recording his lead vocals in the control room in front of 2 speakers, singing with a handheld mic. And it was like everything against what all the crazy people were. Like, if you were a high-level engineer, you would be putting him in an isolation booth, and it would be treated properly, and he would have the highest end microphone, and it would be dead silent, and you'd be able to control the reverb and the delay and the compression, all that kind of stuff. And it just made me realize, like, you know, as long as the quality of the performance was great, at the end of the day, you can make it work, especially if you're a good engineer. And, you know, if you're a good filmmaker, if you're good at making images look good, if you're good at post-production, if you have these little quirks, if these little, you know, like minute kind of differences, or even bigger differences, if they exist at the end in post-production, if you're good at what you do, if you've practiced, if you've really worked at your craft, if you've mastered, you know, the craft of filmmaking, which includes editing, then it's not going to matter, because if you're really good at what you do, the most important thing to you is going to be the story. And when somebody's receiving your film, when they're watching it on a big screen or on their screen at home or on their phone or wherever they're watching it, they're going to be so involved in the exposition of the story, in the arc, in the way the story moves, you know, the conflict and the resolution, the, you know, overcoming obstacles and trying to get to a goal, trying to get to the end, trying to overcome shit. They're not going to worry about, oh my God, the bokeh looks a little different. Notice the edges of the frame, the, you know, the rolling shutter looks different here than it looked earlier in the film. Like, nobody, it's never going to be that distracting if you're good at what you do. If you're not good at what you do, and if your composition is crazy, if you don't know how to level a shot, you know, if you don't know how to expose, if you don't know how to use white balance, if you don't know how to deal with your ISO settings and your noise is crazy from shot to shot, then it's going to suck. But that's because you suck. It's not because your equipment sucks. But if you know what you're doing, if you know how to get the most out of any camera and any lens that somebody puts in your hands, and you know how to deal with your lighting, and you think about colors and clothing and, you know, background, and if you think about locations, and if you think about foreground and background and how you set things up, then you'll be fine. So, you know what? I have to say to myself, thank you for talking this out, because I'm not going to be as crazy as I was about figuring this out. I'm still going to do the research, and I'm going to be as diligent as I possibly can to get this right. But I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to make sure that I worry about my script, my story, and make sure that I get that correct. And then I'll be grateful for whatever I get, because I love filmmaking so much. I love theater and I love filmmaking. And put those two things together, it's all about the story. It's all about inspiring people with this story. But I also love the technical aspects of it, and I love the challenge. You know, I'm really embracing the challenge of trying to make all this stuff fit together. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So, yeah, I guess that's the end of this video, and I hope you got something out of this. How to deal with different focal lengths, different lenses from different companies, anamorphics versus sphericals or with sphericals. Aspect ratio is so important. You know, figuring out whether you want to shoot with wider lenses or longer lenses, and if you want people to feel like they're like right in the middle of a scene, or if you want them to look like they're observing from far away, then you're going to use longer lenses. If you want them to feel like almost uncomfortably close, you're going to use wider lenses, and you're going to put that camera right in front of the face of the subject. That's really much more important than thinking about matching colors and stuff like that. I mean, it's important, but like I said, if you're good at what you do, you're going to figure it out. So anyway, please subscribe, and please hit the like button, and please consider joining my Patreon. That would be so amazing. Go to my website, get to know who I am, watch my movies, you know, come see me in the theater if I happen to be in a city near you. come see my screening at the Manhattan Film Festival in June. I still don't have the specific, I do have a specific date and time, but it's not official yet, so I don't want to say it until it's official. I do have a screening on June 2nd up in Poughkeepsie, New York, but that's in a small kind of space. It's an intimate thing. I'm kind of doing it for my block, for my neighborhood. I still don't really know anybody in my community where I'm at. Even though I'm a part of the community, you know, because I shop there, I'm on Main Street in Poughkeepsie all the time. I move around in this area a lot, you know, but I don't know my own neighbors, so I just feel like now more than ever it's important to do that. So anyway, this video is over. We'll see how the audio worked out. Thanks for putting up with the light going up and down before. And as it turned out, it was cool because it put me in a second location, so this is probably more interesting. This right here is an old drive-in movie theater. I would love to have my movies shown on that screen back there. It's much bigger than it looks with this wide-angle lens. That's the old concession place back there. And I love coming up here. I rehearse here a lot too because nobody bothers me here. And it's really, really fun to rehearse here. I can yell and scream. I'm pretty far from the street. And yeah, that's all I got to say about all of that. And I said quite a bit today. So bye.